Okay, well, we are going to go ahead and get started. We are so excited to have you on our See Where ACE Takes You event tonight. And we're going to go ahead and discuss some paths available to ACE graduates, both within and outside of the education sphere. So tonight, we're going to hear from a few alumni who have used their ACE experience to find success in fields like business, law, and teaching. So just to give you a little sense of our structure before we begin, we'll start with some introductions. Then I'll ask a few questions of our panelists that are kind of more specific to their ACE experiences and current roles. Then after they share their answers, we'll invite some questions from all of you. So when we get to that point of the program, I'll kind of share some instructions on how that whole procedure will go. But for now, I just recommend that you keep your screen in speaker view so that you'll be able to see each panelist clearly throughout the event. Let's get started. Okay. So we're going to begin with just a little bit of a general introduction from each of our wonderful panelists. So I'll just ask you guys to share who you are, where you're from, what your ACE placement and teaching experience was like, and then maybe spend a little bit talking about your current role and work and what you're doing now. So Claire, you had the misfortune of sharing a house with me during ACE for a year. So I'll give you the misfortune of going first tonight, if you don't mind.
Absolutely, Ty. It's greatest year of my life. What are you talking about? So I'm Claire Doyle. I was ACE 26 in San Antonio, Texas with Tyus. I taught fourth grade there for 2 years at St. Thomas More School. I am currently still teaching. I am in Cleveland, Ohio, and I teach at Lakewood Catholic Academy, kind of the opposite of an ACE school, but a great place to be nonetheless. So I teach fifth grade English and eighth grade social studies here, and spent a good portion of my evening at an LCA volleyball game. So still love going to those kind of extracurriculars for the school and getting to support the kids in a lot of different ways.
Awesome. And how did that LCA volleyball game go tonight, Claire?
It was not our best showing. It was not. It was against a team of like 6 foot tall fifth graders. So it didn't go too well for us, but the girls had a blast and it was fun to be there.
Okay. Well, that sounds kind of like an ACE school to me then. So maybe not too different. Katie, do you want to go ahead and go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Wiedenhoft. I'm originally from Long Island. I went to Notre Dame undergrad. Yes, Mike is also from Long Island. Went to Notre Dame undergrad where I studied political science and economics, and then was an ACE intern my senior year of college. Was placed in Denver, Colorado. I was actually at Mike's house. He had all the interns over for dinner. When he said Denver, it was definitely not on my radar or not where I thought I was going to be. But spent 2 awesome years out there teaching 6th, 7th, and 8th grade social studies and religion. Now I work for Booz Allen Hamilton, which is a federal consulting firm, and I live in Washington, D.C. So definitely, pivoted out of teaching, but learned a ton of great things that I know we'll get to in a little bit that have transferred super well into the career that I'm in now.
Awesome. Yeah, we definitely will. Thank you, Katie. Anna, what about you?
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for making the time to listen to us talk tonight. My name's Anna. I grew up in Iowa, went to Notre Dame undergrad. I was an American Studies major, business, econ, and education, schooling, and society minor. Like Katie, I was an ACE intern my senior year. And like Katie, Mike told me my placement, Corpus Christi, but he waited. So all the other interns already knew where they were going, except me and one other intern. And Mike knew where I was going, but he wouldn't tell me. So found out I was going to Corpus. I was ecstatic. It was the kind of place that I wanted to go. Had a great 2 years there teaching middle school social studies for 6th graders and 8th graders, and also coaching the soccer team and the debate team. After that, I moved back to South Bend, spent 2 years working in ACE's education policy group, and now I am a 2nd-year law student at Washington University in St. Louis. I spent last summer working at a large law firm doing general litigation work. I'm happy to talk more about what that looks like and how my teaching experience made me a much better worker in that respect.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna. And I hope you guys understood some of those words she was using there at the end, because I know they went way over my head. So I appreciate that. Just kidding. But we are going to go ahead and get started with our questions tonight. So we're going to begin by talking a little bit about your path to ACE. So my first question is for Anna and Katie, since you guys are in fields outside of education now. My question is, did you always plan on going into a career like the one you're in now? And if so, what compelled you to complete a program like ACE that's kind of seemingly unrelated? And if not, how did your ACE experience help you determine this new career path?
Katie, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I didn't really know, I guess, is what it comes down to. I come from a family of teachers. So, grew up with a lot of really wonderful educators in my life and got to see the fruits of their labors. But also knew it was a really tough job with long hours. So didn't even know if that's what I wanted, and that's where my heart was going to be. In high school and in college, I kind of thought maybe I should do some federal government work, whether it be in politics or some sort of other federal service. So I felt like I was kind of flip-flopping throughout college and high school between those kind of two options. But then I stumbled upon ACE my freshman year of college and just started hearing about it from different people that I knew who were involved with it, or who were interested in it and would bring me along to different events. And I just, it all of a sudden became very appealing to me that there was this option to do service and to teach and get my master's and be involved in this program for 2 years, but also not have to commit the rest of my life to teaching if after those 2 years I didn't really want to do that. And not to say, the end of the 2 years was an easy choice for me to move away from teaching. ACE definitely made me consider staying and teaching a lot more than I thought I was going to when I said yes. At the end of my, or the whatever point of my senior year, I said yes to my placement in Denver. But yeah, super grateful for the people that I got to talk to throughout, kind of the discernment period of ACE, because I think that's really what drew me in. It was all these really, really good people. And Mayor Pete, well, at the time, Mayor Pete came to one of my classes when I was a senior and said, find the people you want to be more like and tether yourself to them. And that's a quote that really stuck with me. And that's kind of what ACE was for me. It was all these really good people that I wanted to be more like, all going to the kind of this one place. And I was like, I guess this program has something good going on. And whether or not teaching is what I want to be doing forever, this seems like for 2 years, this is a really good fit for me. So yeah, I think that's kind of sums up the path for me to ACE.
So unlike Katie, I do not come from a family of educators. I actually come from a family of attorneys. So sort of ended up where many of my family members are. But I actually had a high school teacher who told me about ACE. I expressed to her when I was in high school that I was interested in teaching, but I wanted to go to Notre Dame and I wasn't sure if I could go to Notre Dame and be a teacher. And she found ACE and said, here, Anna, do this. So 18-year-old me walked into the fall career fair and walked right up to the ACE table and said, hi, I'm Anna. I want to be in your program. And it ended up working out. I would echo Katie's note about how wonderful the people in ACE are. They are the reason I am who I am today, and I would not be where I am today without the people who I tethered myself to at ACE. So sort of the change happened, I would say, the change from teaching to law happened not necessarily because of any big decision that I made in my own head, but sort of because of the options that laid out in front of me as I was moving through my career. So when I finished teaching, I had the opportunity to apply and then go work in ACE's education policy group, which is something that I've always been really interested in. And I also, when I was in kindergarten, I wanted to be the president. Politics is like basketball to me. It's my favorite thing in the world to think about. So I was really interested in that opportunity. I think had that opportunity not been available, I would have stayed in the classroom. I loved my experience teaching and I still miss it almost every day. So if that fork had gone differently, I think my life would look really different. But got to come and work at ACE, kind of really dig into education policy, got to help teach a class on education policy and the law. And I just love the way of thinking. I like the analytical way that the law teaches you to walk through a problem and try to come to a solution that's going to work for everybody now, but also for everybody in the future. So I think law school was definitely always an option for me. It wasn't something I was set on. And teaching was also always an option for me. It wasn't necessarily something I was set on. And if you were going to ask me what my pipe dream is, someday I'd love to be a law professor and teach people how to think like lawyers. I think that's something I would really enjoy. So kind of combine the two things coming together.
Oh, yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Katie, for those great answers. And so, Claire, we're going to go over to you now. Since you are still a teacher, Claire, my question for you is, did you always want to become a teacher? And if so, why did you decide to do ACE instead of going straight into a kind of a full-time teaching position? And if not, what about your ACE experience led you to stay in the field of education?
Yeah, absolutely. So for a long time, I wanted to be a biomedical engineer, and teaching was nowhere on my radar. What actually brought me to ACE was kind of a combination of things. My mom is a teacher and taught with an ACE teacher. So I had known what an ACE teacher was for a long time, and they were pretty phenomenal people. I think you'll see that as a theme. We have pretty great people in ACE. So you meet these people and it's hard to forget what it means to be an ACE teacher afterwards. So I had heard about these kind of teachers my whole life. And then when I started at Notre Dame, I started in the education, schooling, and societies minor, and started meeting more ACE people. And I was really interested in the idea of education as a whole, as a system, not necessarily in the idea of being a teacher myself, but thinking about what is education and what it's kind of what is the role of education in our society. So when I started thinking about ACE, I was considering using it more as a pathway to something else, possibly to law school like Anna, or possibly to something in business or who knows what else. And when I first got in the classroom, my first year in San Antonio, my first week in San Antonio, I just felt so at home, and everything was crazy. And I had kids like running around and screaming and going crazy and probably crying in the corner. But for some reason, I loved every second of it. And it just felt like the right place to be for me. So throughout the course of that year, I did a lot of discerning about, is this something I want to stay in? And I had a lot of great conversations with other ACE teachers who had taken both paths, and just decided that even if I do want to continue in something in education later, anything that I do requires really great classroom experience. And that was something that I got during ACE and that I'm continuing to get afterwards. So definitely great experience, and met some great people along the way. And it has determined where I am now and will probably continue to keep me in a classroom for a couple of years in the future.
That's wonderful. And I don't believe for a second that there were kids running around in your classroom, Claire. That's
Never,
to make us all feel better. Great. Thank you all. So now we're going to kind of move to a series of questions about kind of your path beyond ACE and how you landed on the position you're in now and how ACE has benefited you. So my next question for all three of you is, how have your ACE experiences been beneficial in your current position? And are there any skills or perspectives that you feel you gained from completing ACE that are transcendent across disciplines?
I can speak to that. I feel like it's an easy answer for me. So I'm going to start with my summer job from last summer. When I was interviewing for that job, they asked me, why do you think your experience as a teacher is going to make you a better attorney? And that wasn't something I had really thought about that hard yet. But what I ended up answering was, when you're teaching, like if you're trying to teach a class of 8th graders, the intricacies of the Electoral College, what you're doing is taking something really, really, really complex and trying to distill it into something that a person who is an 8th grader can understand. And that skill of taking something that's really, really, really complex, even if it's like multiplication, because when you're 6, you don't know how to multiply. The idea of multiplying numbers is something that's really difficult for you to get. So if a teacher can figure out a way to take something that's so complex and make it into something digestible, that skill is transferable to everything. But I think particularly if you're an attorney working with clients, you've got really complex legal principles that your clients need to understand, and being able to take that really complex topic and put it into language that a regular person can understand is an invaluable skill. And then the second thing I think that goes, it's an underrated skill you learn teaching, is talking in front of people. So I don't get stage fright, but many of my friends in ACE did get stage fright. And many of my friends in law school get stage fright, but talking in front of a group of 30 people doesn't scare me because I did it every day for 2 years. So I think two of those two sort of hard skills, the idea of distilling something complex into something manageable and being able to speak in front of people without being afraid, have helped me a lot, both as a law student and in the work that I have done professionally as well.
That's awesome. And I'd love to hear that lecture on the Electoral College later. Maybe we can stay on
No, you wouldn't. I promise you wouldn't.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna.
I would echo a lot of what Anna said. And I think in addition to the kind of speaking in front of a group of people, I think teaching, especially in ACE, teaches you to be really quick on your feet, to be flexible, and especially to be resourceful. We work in schools that may not have a lot to work with. So being able to be creative and come up with engaging and interesting solutions is really important and something that I learned and definitely took away. When I think about how ACE has helped me grow as a teacher specifically, and the things that I have taken away and used in a new teaching position, one of the biggest things that I think about is the ability that I have to make connections with my students. I think something ACE pushes our teachers to do is really connect with students, engage with them as people, not just as students. And that's something that I love to be able to do in my school. Teachers are phenomenal people, and sometimes we get too caught up in being teachers. And so something that I love to do is really connect with my students outside of that, and go to things like their volleyball games and their soccer practices and birthday parties I've been invited to. So I think it gives us an ability to connect with people, big people, little people, all of them on a different level.
Yeah, I completely echo everything that Claire and Anna have said. I think, adding on to what they said, when you're a teacher, you're the one responsible for making every single decision, not just in terms of like what the day is going to look like, what you're going to be teaching, how you're going to be teaching it, but like, how do you respond to the student who's like crying in the corner or acting out and wants your attention? So there's a lot of autonomy that comes with the job. And I think that might seem daunting, for people who haven't been in the classroom, but I think that's something that I value so much. And it's funny, I now teach catechism, or I teach religion on Sundays after mass, and I have a co-teacher, and it's been actually super interesting because I'm back in the classroom and I have to remind myself that like, I am not the one person in charge, right? Like I need to do this 50-50. I'm not the one making every single decision. It's a team effort. But I think in terms of like translating that into the world that I'm in, it's just given me so much confidence in terms of like, okay, I was in charge of like 30 kids all day, every day, whether it be in the classroom or like driving them on a bus through the mountains of Colorado in the rain when I like definitely wasn't supposed to be driving a bus or whatever it was. So I think it just gave me a lot of confidence. And that's something I thought a lot about when I was in my second year of ACE, when I made the decision to, when I knew I was going to not teach anymore. And I was thinking, what is it that I go into next? And I was preparing for interviews. And like, I'm not very business minded, but this is going to be a very business oriented answer. But like, you have to think about how you're going to sell yourself. Or I had to think about, how am I going to pitch these 2 years of ACE to people who have no idea what it is, who are, the last thing they, think they're looking for in someone is someone who is a teacher. How can I really sell myself to them? And it's exactly what Claire and Anna have already said, right? It's like, the human interaction, it's making those decisions for yourself. It's taking those complex things and being able to, have conversations with different groups of audiences, and like sit in meetings with 3-star generals is something that I've like gotten to do, and like have material that they can, understand at the highest level, but then have material that people, at the lowest levels working for them also understand. And just another like little tidbit, I guess, from today that I was thinking about, I had to cold call someone who like works on the government side, who was ignoring my emails and really didn't want to answer a question I had. And I really don't care for cold calling people, but when I was, especially my first year, I had so many 8th grade parent meetings, and some of those parents were so scary. So I literally said to myself, I said, Katie, if you can get through 8th grade parent meetings, you can get through a cold call to someone whose like job it is to be answering your call and answering your question. So I think there's just been so many ways that ACE sets you up for life outside of teaching, if that's like the route that you choose.
Yeah, awesome. And I've always said the only thing, more intimidating than a 3-star general is an 8th grade parent. So that's awesome, Katie. Thank you so much for sharing. So I want to make sure, just to be conscientious of everyone's time, that we give you and the audience chances to ask questions of our wonderful panelists. So we'll get to our Q&A section of the night now. Kind of how that will work. When you have a question, just go ahead and raise your Zoom hand, and I'll call on you by name. Once I call upon you, just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, and then one of the panelists will pick it up and we can go from there. Yeah, Kevin, go ahead.
In speaking with people who I've talked to that have been through ACE, one of my most enjoyable questions I've asked is, what has been the hardest challenge in the classroom for you, and how you dealt with it?
Great, Kevin. Great question. Thank you, Kevin.
I have a story that pops to mind sort of right away. And I know Claire's going to be a better person to answer this question, so I'll be really quick. But in my first year, in the first project that I gave my students, we called it a performance assessment. You'll learn what that means. I had 2 of my students who turned in the same project, 2 separate projects of the identical project. And looking back, what I wish I would have done is been very stern and nipped it in the bud. And instead, I said, how can I make this so it's a good outcome for my students, so that they're not angry and so their parents aren't angry, and so that I'm not causing a big scandal with there being cheating in my classroom? And those were not the right questions to ask myself. So I remember just stressing out over, how am I going to deal with this? Like, this is 10% of their grade. Their moms are going to be furious. And I wish I would have realized 2 things. First, my life for the rest of the year would have been easier if I made it very clear that that was unacceptable in my classroom, because once you let that go, it grows on its own. And second, I was not the one causing the cheating scandal. The problem was that my students had chosen to cheat. So sort of flipping that view that there are things you can control in your classroom, and there are things that happen outside of your classroom that you can't control. So that's the thing that pops to mind for me. And my advice then to you going forward would be to think about the long term when you're making decisions about the short term.
Yeah, I think a lot of mine might have to do with that kind of same theme as well, Anna. When I think about the most challenging things that might happen in a classroom, the past ACE teachers will recognize this more, but I think of Mark Johnson standing in the back of my classroom. Mark Johnson was my academic supervisor. He would come in and observe classes. And that is always the most terrifying thing to me, is somebody from outside my classroom coming in. And sometimes it looks like an absolute mess. Like, the superintendent of San Antonio schools one day walked in and I was laying on the floor working on a math problem with a student. And I'm like, hey, Marty, what's going on? And so for me, sometimes the most challenging thing can be to remember that my little world of my classroom exists in a much larger world. And that can mean 2 things. One, I have to kind of juggle my expectations with those of my school and the people around me. But 2, I do get to kind of be the creator and the owner of this world, this classroom, and make it a wonderful and creative and engaging space. But it's kind of a balancing act of, is what I'm doing in here meeting the expectations of my school and my principal, but am I also making this a really great place for my students themselves? So definitely still working on that balance, but I do kind of take priority about what my classroom looks like, and I love making it a fun and engaging space. And sometimes you hear us from down the hallway, and I have gotten noise complaints before, and I'm kind of okay with it. We have a blast, and that's what matters to me at the end of the day.
I've gotten noise complaints before, and I'm kind of okay with it. It needs to be put like on some ACE t-shirt or something, like
Yeah.
I think that'd be great.
My school didn't have homeroom. It had something called crew, which was like a mixture of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and we would meet in the morning and the afternoon. And like, when you're in 6th grade, you know, you enter crew and you stay in that through middle school. So the kids were used to crew and like used to their teachers. So when I came in my first year and was replacing the teacher who left, who wasn't an ACE teacher, but who had been there for a very long time and was like super beloved by the community. Those were definitely really hard shoes to fill, especially when I kept hearing about like how Crew was supposed to be this like beautiful place where everyone just like shared their feelings and like loved each other and like did all these fun things. And like, I was like, oh my goodness, this is nowhere near that. Like, what am I doing wrong? And it just took a lot of like patience, and it took, me just developing relationships with students one-on-one. So that way they, when we came back together as a group, they would come to trust me, but it definitely took months. So I think it was, getting rid of like the ego in myself, and recognizing that like, no, I wasn't going to be the teacher who left and they loved, but like in my own time, in my own ways, like I would build this community in a different way. So definitely taught me some patience, which I always tend to struggle with. So that was good.
That's really cool. Thank you, Katie. So we've got time for about 1 or 2 more questions. Feel free again to just raise those Zoom hands and I'll call on you once you've done so. All right. Well, feel free to still raise your Zoom hand if one comes to you, but I have one more question I will ask the panel. And then
I can't figure it out.
Oh,
I don't know how to do it.
Ryan, you got a question?
Yeah, I had a question. I just can't figure out the hand.
Yeah. Oh, you're good. You're good. Go for it, my man.
Well, I was wondering how, I think Anna touched on it, but I'm thinking about law school afterwards. I was going to ask if it was a good bridge between that, because I'm thinking about taking a couple gap years between undergrad and law school.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I would say is anybody who's considering applying for law school, and probably most graduate school programs, unless it's a master's program like ACE, should consider taking at least 1 gap year first. I'm happy to talk more about this with you. You feel free to reach out to me. They can give you my contact information, but it made me a much more competitive candidate for law school. Yes. But more than that, finding a job during your 1L summer is notoriously difficult. And the fact that I had experience outside of school made it much easier for me. And that's continued to be true. So I would recommend, obviously ACE, because ACE is the best graduate program in the country and you should totally do it. But no matter what, if you're thinking about applying to law school, you should absolutely take at least 1 year to do something else in the real world before you come back to school. I think a program like ACE, and ACE specifically, obviously, is a really good way to do that. I'll give you 2 reasons, but there are like 1,000. First is many of us come from backgrounds where we've been afforded the opportunities that most people in the world don't get. Like the fact that you're on the Zoom means that you've had an opportunity that was precluded to a lot of the students that we might be able to teach in ACE. So for me, that looked like going to a Catholic grade school that I loved. And so serving in ACE gave me the opportunity to give back in a way that just, it filled my cup up. It made me remember why I love being a Catholic and why I love school so much. But second, what we already talked about, which are those kind of soft and hard skills that you learn as a teacher, you can't beat it. Like working for a year at a startup or working for a year on the Hill in DC, those are all really cool experiences, but you're not going to learn the autonomy that Katie mentioned, and you're not going to learn sort of the flexibility that Claire mentioned in those roles in the same way that you will teaching at a middle school. There's just no experience like it. So you should definitely do it and do middle school because it rocks.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you for that question, Ryan. And yes, I agree. Middle school is the best. All right. Last question of the day. Anna, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for sharing. I guess a couple of you already mentioned sort of like your Catholic upbringing or like your Catholic identity. Can you just kind of briefly speak to how you sort of lived that out through the program or like found spirituality? What sort of avenues are there within the ACE program for that? Thanks.
Yeah, I can speak to this a little bit. So I taught religion and social studies when I was an ACE teacher. And grew up Catholic, went to Catholic high school, through Notre Dame and everything. But really felt like a deep spiritual connection, like personally when I was in ACE, because I felt like, yes, I'm going to mass on Sundays and I'm going to school masses. And actually my second year, I went to weekday mass 4 times a week because it was COVID and I was taking all the kids to mass because we couldn't have like everyone together. But I found like when I was sitting, you know, in the pew, it wasn't just me listening to like the homily for my own sake, but I was trying to connect it to like, okay, how can I bring this back into the classroom? Or, you know, how can I connect this to some lesson that we're doing? Or how can I connect what we're doing in social studies to catechism? And I think like now that I'm out of that, I recognize how much of a unique experience that was and how much, quite honestly, like I'm lacking that now in my life. And I was actually just back in Denver last weekend for a wedding at my school church with our pastor who I love so much. And I was just reminded of like how much of a special place that was for me, both like the physical place of the church, but also just kind of like that time in that period and that environment that like I was able to have through, you know, specifically, again, teaching those 2 subjects and being able to be in a Catholic environment where, you know, even in social studies, I could relate something to like Catholic social teaching, you know, where, you know, here's a saint that, you know, also fought for and believed in this thing that, you know, we're talking about with activists or whatever it is. So for me, it was definitely a great period that I'm striving to get back towards.
In addition to being able to be religious at school, one thing that I found really helpful with ACE is you're living in a community of people who share the same religious beliefs as you. I'm very extroverted, and I now, not being in a religious place, WashU is like, not only is it not Catholic, it's like the most secular place I've ever been in my life. I have one Catholic professor this semester. I found out she was Catholic and it like blew my mind. Like the community just doesn't exist here. So being in a house full of other people who wanted to do sort of the Catholic things, who wanted to sit and talk about some current event and how it related to our faith and fight about it. Like we shared different views. And so how can we ground those things in our faith? Like that community aspect in a totally low pressure environment, because everybody is there to love you and support you, is something that I really appreciated. And like Katie said, it's something that I really miss now. Like if I showed up to class with ashes on my head and I had people ask me like, how are you religious? How are you Christian? How is that something you can be? And that was a totally new experience for me. And I drew a lot of confidence from knowing that the community that I had in ACE like prepared me for this. We've talked about why we believe what we believe. We've fought with each other about the things that we believe and don't believe. So I found that community aspect really, really helpful as well.
Yeah, I would echo that community was a really strong place to kind of think about my own faith and you know, the faith that I taught at school. We had an interesting community because faith was kind of really at the center of a lot of conversations we had. We had one of our community members was considering joining the seminary when we were in our second year. And so we had a lot of really open and honest conversations about faith that I have never had in any other community I've been a part of. So it was really a special time, and I would agree, kind of something that I miss. You know, maybe not like every single night at dinner sometimes, but it was really a special time. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for those answers. And just real quick to wrap up, our last question, just if one of you wants to take it, just 30 seconds, what's one piece of advice that you would give to a student currently kind of considering ACE and thinking about, you know, doing ACE post-grad?
Just do it.
Do it. I was going to say do it too.
I mean, like it's scary. It's a big commitment to especially, you know, give 2 years of your life to this program. But I think as any of us will testify, it is a phenomenal way to spend 2 years. And one of the best commitments that you could make. There are very few bad things to come out of ACE and just a world of good.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Claire. Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you so much, Katie, for being on tonight. Really enjoyed listening to you guys' answers and your perspectives. That's really awesome. And thank you to all of you guys in attendance for being here tonight and listening to our speakers. It was great to see you all. And just, you know, for your radar coming up, we'll have a few more of these webinars this semester. Our next one is going to be October 26th, and I believe that's going to be an ACE application kind of tips and tricks night. So we'd love to see some more of those, but thank you so much for being here tonight, and enjoy the rest of your evening.